Thanks for inviting me to talk about what is probably the most long-range challenge facing government today, and that's the federal government, state government, and local government. You know, infrastructure has been described as the least sexiest word in the English language. And there's something true about that, and we're very low on the funding pecking order because people don't foresee infrastructure as having immediate needs. Oh yes, when a bridge collapses and people die, there's a rush to do something about our infrastructure, which lasts for 30, maybe 45 days and then dissipates. But infrastructure is a way. Look, America's been blessed with the most abundant set of natural resources of, I think, any country in the world. And yet the key to effectively using those resources is infrastructure. Our infrastructure can't support the effective use of our resources. Let me give you 3 quick examples. Pennsylvania is a very good state for production of wind energy. We're a mountainous state, the most mountainous state east of the Mississippi, and there are lots of wind farms cropping up all over Pennsylvania. But our electrical grid isn't built out enough to support going to where those mountains are. So we can't effectively use all of our wind capacity. Ports, we're blessed with 2 enormous coastlines, which make it easy to ship goods from Asia and Europe to our ports. And as many of you know, the Panama Canal is being deepened to allow these super tankers, which used to have to unload in Long Beach and then have their goods trucked or trained to the East Coast. They're going to allow those Supermax tankers to go through the canal and come up to the eastern seaboard. But only 2 of the 12 major ports on the eastern seaboard are dredged sufficiently to allow those super tankers to come into their ports and unload. And as a result, much of that cargo is going to unload in Canada, taking with it tens of thousands of well-paying trucker and longshoreman jobs. Superstorm Sandy, it was alluded to, showed us that our infrastructure is extremely vulnerable. Extremely vulnerable because we don't invest and because we don't use common sense. When New York, Lower Manhattan flooded and the subways went out for days because they were flooded and caused electrical shortages and outs in the subways. People started looking at how do we protect the subways? And in places in Asia and Europe that are flood prone, they build the subways up. Instead of walking downstairs to get into a subway, which lends itself to when water comes going right down those stairs, they make you walk up a few steps before you get into the subways, and then you walk down, and that's just enough to make sure that the water doesn't come in. But not only do we fail to invest in our infrastructure, we fail to protect it in some basic ways. Now, our water infrastructure is enormously important. Our water, our stormwater, our wastewater infrastructure, enormously important to the country. But it's very low in the pecking order, well below roads, bridges, and highways. Not that we're doing much for roads, bridges, and highways either. But it's very low. And consider, to juxtapose water infrastructure with highway infrastructure, that there are 30 times as many pipelines, length of pipelines in this country, water that deliver water, as there are miles in the interstate highway system, 30 times. And those pipes have become extraordinarily vulnerable. They're vulnerable because, like many of us, they're getting old, or in fact, they're really old. One year when I was mayor of Philadelphia, we had 45 straight days where the temperature was below 30 degrees. Everything froze. It snowed, and the snow and the ice stayed on the ground for a month and a half. But on the 46th day, it was 60 degrees. On the 47th day, it was 65 degrees. And 54 significant water mains burst in Philadelphia during those 2 days. Why did they burst? Well, I brought our water folks in and our managers in after those 2 days, and I asked them, and they said, Mayor, many of those pipes were laid in the 19th century. In the 19th century, that's the 1800s. Now, that's not something that's unique to Philadelphia. It's prevalent in most older northeastern and midwestern cities. And water mains bursting is not unique to Philadelphia either. Each year, 24,000 water mains burst in the United States. That's 1 every 2 minutes. But we don't always lose water because of old pipes that burst. We lose them because of old, improperly implemented pipes that leak. Leakage is an enormous problem in the American water infrastructure. We lose 1.7 trillion gallons of water every year because of leakage. To give you a frame of reference for that, that's 4.5 years of all of the water that the 8 million people and the visitors to New York City use. 4.5 years we lose in 1 year. 25% of all treated water in this country is wasted because of leakage. It never hits its recipients. Think about that. So we have a real crisis in our water system. And it's estimated that in the next 25 years, the American Society of Civil Engineers, which incidentally graded our water infrastructure as a solid D, at least we didn't get an F, we were a solid D. And the ASCE estimates that we're going to have to spend $4.8 trillion in the next 25 years just to maintain a system in decent repair. $4.8 trillion. Well, we were talking upstairs about the difficulty in getting people to invest in infrastructure in the current political atmosphere. And I noted that Senator Corker, a Republican from Tennessee, sponsored a bill with Senator Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, to raise the gas tax 12 cents a gallon and to adjust it each year for inflation. Senator Corker could not get one Republican co-sponsor, not one. And if you consider how difficult that is, do you think the public sector is going to pay $4.8 trillion to maintain our water infrastructure? Not a chance. Not a chance. Slowly but surely, some public officials are getting sensitized to the crisis, but there is no chance that the public will fill that gap. So we've got to turn to innovative private sector solutions. Solutions very much like the SUEZ environment model. It's already, the SUEZ model has already been adopted by the town of Middleton, Pennsylvania, and Bayonne, New Jersey. And those were significant challenges because people instinctively react when they hear we're going to privatize something, particularly something as fundamental to their life as water. They instantly react with fear. Well, the private sector is going to really raise our prices. Or the private sector is not going to care about quality. Well, those are all legitimate hurdles to be overcome, but they're not easy to overcome. But SUEZ overcame them in Middleton and in Bayonne, winning the vote of public officials that were, in fact, talked to by some people in the public who didn't want to see change happen. Well, private sector innovation is a key to solving our water infrastructure problems if there's a reasonable, predictable return. Look, as much as we'd like to think that the private sector is going to, because of the future of the earth, and you did give us some good examples of private sector taking chances on reducing profits, but generally that doesn't happen. They need a predictable rate of return. If they get it, they'll invest because there is money to be made and because these are stable investments. No one's going to shut off water spouts for citizens. But we've got to have a predictable rate of return. Interestingly, 50% of the communities in the United States have their water systems privatized. But that only accounts for about 20% of the water that's used in the country each year. Because the big cities, where political pressure is the most prevalent, where the news media is the most active in stirring things up, those big cities have been the ones that have been most reluctant to privatize their water systems. Now, if you think about it, what's one important energy source that is totally privatized, regulated by the public, but totally privatized? The infrastructure, electricity. The electricity infrastructure is totally private. It's regulated by state utility commissions, which are less subject to political whims than elected officials, and the system works. Agreed, we have some problems with the electricity infrastructure, but by and large, the system has worked. By and large, when improvements are needed, The companies go before the utility commissions and seek rate increases, and by and large, rate increases are granted. I want to close by giving you one example of where we need to go in my judgment, and it's in the city of Philadelphia. I didn't have any responsibility for this. This came in 2011, so it's impossible for me to take credit for it, but it was a very innovative and green program. The city, like 80 other big cities, has a problem fulfilling the requirements of the Clean Water Act when it comes to stormwater. And as you know, in systems that are combined sewers, there's CSO, combined sewer overflow, and the water that runs off from rainstorms gets into the sewer system and disrupts it and causes the discharge of a lot of matter that shouldn't get into the water and needs to be cleaned up and prevented. So Philadelphia, which needs to invest $1.6 billion in doing something about their system, decided to try to pass a stormwater surcharge on your water bill. Now, that's difficult to get through our city council because our city council generally has the backbone of a sponge, but and that's probably unfair to sponges. but they keyed it and made the fee green. So there was an incentive. You could get credits towards the fee by being green, by taking your land and making it more permeable. So, for example, the average homeowner in Philadelphia pays $13.80 a month for the stormwater fee. Commercial users pay a much more significant amount, but the University of Pennsylvania, which has a leafy green campus, for those of you who know it, pays $11,000 a month. The Philadelphia airport, which is all concrete and no permeability at all, pays $126,000 a month. So there's incentives to making it work. But that predictable rate of return has allowed the city to float bonds, tax-exempt bonds, to produce $1.6 billion of private sector financing. Look, there are people who instinctively react against anything that's privatized. When I tried to privatize the Pennsylvania Turnpike, my citizens were all upset because it was an Australian company that was perceived to be the leading bidder. And I said to them, yeah, we have to worry about those Australian terrorists getting control of our turnpike, and toll takers are replaced by kangaroos. We have to worry about loss of jobs. And then the winning bidder turned out to be a Spanish company by the name of Aventis, and people were up in arms. And I said, okay, everyone who's mad about this cannot fly into Orlando because Aventis runs the Orlando airport. The Orlando airport's management has been totally privatized. And Americans are starting to get it. I think the pathway to privatization, the pathway to private sector coming in and funding and running and managing things, that pathway is becoming far and far more open. And it is the wave of the future. But we've got to protect our infrastructure in roads and highways and bridges, in water and energy and broadband, you name it. We have to protect our infrastructure and we have to invest in it. And it's only by involving the private sector with innovative models like SUEZ Environment, it's only by doing that that we can make infrastructure the centerpiece of the resource revolution and ensure for us a safe, secure, and prosperous future. Thank you.